Man, I cannot wait to fucking go to Europe, get all geared up, take a bunch of shit, and try and win. I never thought that.
Armstrong is coming with an incredible rush. Is there any stopping Lance Armstrong in this Tour de France? And the answer is no, there is not.
After you had people singing like a bird to a federal agent, it was over.
What is the financial impact of that, roughly?
Every week I'm getting a letter from some insurance company like, hey, you owe us $15 million. And I'm like, oh, fuck.
Some breaking news now on Lance Armstrong.
Quote, there is no place in cycling for Lance Armstrong.
Sponsorships and influence have fallen off a cliff.
By the way, we did pass all the tests.
Yeah.
That's not bullshit.
Yeah.
The testing sucked.
You basically said something along the lines of, I had cancer. I'd be an absolute idiot to be doing this type of stuff. What are you thinking when you're saying that?
There's only one word. It's embarrassing.
Uber.
Yeah, that helped.
That helped, right?
That helped.
Have you ever publicly said what happened there?
It's fucking magic.
Yeah, that's a nice surprise.
I am perhaps one of the most polarizing figures in America, or in the world. You have two choices when you know that you're that guy, right? You either...
All right, so let's start.
Let's start.
I want to talk about a bunch of stuff. First, I got one good question. You ready?
Yeah.
I did a little research before this. I found out you own a cafe called Juan Pelota.
Yeah, well, it's that's true.
You still own it?
Also true. It's connected to, I have a bike shop that I've had for, probably close to 15 years in Austin, right downtown, before downtown Austin was just, absolutely massive. And that bike shop's called Mellow Johnny's, and it's a beautiful old building. It is, and of course we are biased, but it is hands down the coolest bike shop in the world.
Why is that?
It just, it's a big open space. The people that work there are amazing. And bike shops can be a little intimidating, especially for women.
Yeah.
You walk into a store, there's all kinds of mechanical stuff, and you're trying, how do I shift? And where's the safe place to ride? And, cycling can be intimidating and daunting. And so the staff there for all the time we've been open has been just great with people. And that store's called Mellow Johnny's, which is also a play on some words. That's a play on maillot jaune. And then we wanted to do a coffee shop to your question. And I had always just, had a little fun with my diagnosis.
So people that don't know, it's one ball. Is that correct?
Well, again to that. So Juan is
be Juan.
And a long time ago, I would check in when I needed to check in under a fake name. I would always check in under Juan Pelota. And so then we opened the store and we borrowed the name Juan. Sounds like one, and Pelota means ball. So
that's amazing.
So
it's even better that you checked in on that. You use that as a fake name.
Yeah. Used to.
Yeah.
Coffee and bikes kind of go hand in hand. So and it's a great cafe. I mean, it's there are people that just go to the cafe. They don't even. It's actually connected to the bike store. But there are people that just go there and don't even wander into the store.
Love it. All right, let's start at the beginning. How does a guy from Plano, Texas, a kid, get interested in swimming, cycling, triathlons, etc.?
Real simple. I as a kid from Plano, and to take you back to the 80s when I grew up in Plano was, and we all, I think most of us understand the importance of football in the state of Texas. And of course, then I spent most of my adult life in Austin, and we've had, 3 state championship titles with Westlake. But going back to the 80s, Plano was a powerhouse. Mm-hmm. So most kids in Plano, or most kids in Texas for that matter, really sort of get not pushed into, but sort of encouraged to play the mainstream sports, especially football. And I did the same. And
football, basketball, baseball,
all of them.
Yeah.
And I sucked. I sucked at all of them.
Really?
I couldn't. I don't have a ton of side-to-side coordination. I don't have great hand-eye coordination. And I just grew tired of it. I thought, this is, I'm not very good at this. This isn't a whole lot of fun. And this is probably in the 6th or 7th grade. I'm starting to figure this out. And my mom, I said, I don't want to play these sports. And she said, and my mom was, this is just to put it in context, when I'm that age, my mom's probably not even 30 years old.
Yeah.
She had me when she was 17. So tough little lady. She said, "That's fine, but you have to play a sport." And I thought, "Oh God, what am I going to do?" And so I looked around. I had a few friends that were on the swim team. And I thought, well, I'll try the swim team. But, again, I was 12, 13 years old. And, most kids that are swimmers start swimming when they're 6, 7 years old. All the greats started very, very young. And so, but I didn't know how to swim. And so but I joined the team, City of Plano Swimmers. Chris McCurdy was the coach, who's a legendary coach. And but I had to start swimming with 6-year-olds. Just to learn how to swim and learn all the strokes and learn the technique.
I'm sure that quickly passed.
Well, it did, but I think about this a lot. I don't know what kept me in it. It's for a 12-year-old kid to swim with 7-year-olds when all your buddies are down in their lane. I hung in there. I don't, for whatever, call it fate, call it determined, I don't know, but I stayed. Yeah. And a month later, I went over a lane with the 8-year-olds, and a month after that, then pretty soon I was, one of the best swimmers in the state. So that's how you get, and then from there, that was my my entree into, let's just call it endurance sports, right? Yeah. And all the while too, another sport that I picked up was I ran track and cross country in high school. So now you have the bookends of the triathlon.
Yep.
And then I went at some point, saw an ad for a triathlon, a kids triathlon, sponsored by Rainbow Bread. I thought, well, that would be cool. I just don't know. I don't have a bike, so I managed to get a bike and join the triathlon and won the triathlon. And really, the rest is history. And then actually,
and you're what age at this point? You're like teenager.
Iron Kids, I was 13, 14.
Because you went pro at 15?
I went pro at 15 years old.
15.
So, but the only reason I did that was we had the biggest triathlon in the world at the time was in Dallas, sponsored by a chain of gyms, Bally Fitness, called President's Triathlon. And I had a guy that I trained with. He said, like, you should just race with the pros, because I could swim with the pros, for sure. Potentially could ride with them, and certainly couldn't run with them. They're a lot older.
Are you training, though, at the time, like you're going to do this full time, or is it just happenstance that you walked into it and you were very good? And
well, I'm training with the swim team, which is, when you're training.
Swim training is hard.
It's
right?
hard.
Yeah,
it's hard. I mean, we're swimming anywhere from 6,000 to 10,000 yards a day.
That's crazy.
Which is a lot. Think about that. That's
and if you
4
do
to 6 miles.
Swimming, typically it's like 3 to 4 times running. The distance wise, like it's
no. The run
comparable?
is 6 times farther.
6 times farther.
Yeah, but so you're swimming that much, and then I was also in the mornings running either track or cross country with the high school team. So I already had that there, and then on the weekends I'd go out on local group rides.
Yeah.
And so I mean, it was kind of all there. I was still going to school as well. So I jumped in this triathlon in Dallas, and come out of the water with all the top pros. I mean, I'm looking around, thinking, Mark Allen there and Greg Welch, all these guys. I mean, just I'm like, oh, this is cool. Get on the bike, just riding my race, and I'm with these dudes.
Yeah. Are they surprised at this point?
Yeah, they race with each other every weekend.
Yeah,
so they know everybody in the field. I think they probably, you'd have to ask them, but I think they probably were going, who's this guy? Is this guy just jump on the course? And then got off the bike with Mark Allen. He and I came off tied for second, and then it faded in the run. I mean, again, these guys could run, low 30s in the 10K. And I was not anywhere near that, but still finished respectable. I think I ended up top 10. And after that, I kept going, kept racing, kept traveling, started swimming less, but which didn't make Coach McCurdy very happy. But
what?
And then had the dream. I mean, I think because the continuation of that story is like, how does that get you cycling? The dream was always to go to the Olympics, but this is turned pro in triathlon in 1987. The sport of triathlon wasn't an Olympic sport until 2000 in Sydney. So I'm watching this play out, and then also really starting to loved the bike, loved that more than anything else. That was sort of my jam.
Yeah.
And made the full-time switch in 1989, 1990, and then went to the Olympics in 1992. And I would have had to wait, another 8 more years, assuming I could have made that team. I was not – the best triathletes can really, really run. And I can really swim, and I can really ride.
Yeah.
And I can sort of run, but not like they can. So it was probably a good idea to switch to cycling.
When you look back today, I'm sure at the time you just assumed you didn't really think much of it probably. But today it probably seems like you had an outsized work ethic or drive that other people didn't have at the time, right? You're 15 years old going pro, you're riding, you're swimming, you're running on the weekends.
Yeah. Traveling all over,
traveling all
alone.
Over. A lot of kids aren't doing that.
No,
right?
I know.
At that
And
age.
my mom thought I was crazy. She said, "You're going to go where?" I mean, I was going, Venezuela, Mexico, Bermuda, Canada. And without my mom, she had a full-time job and pre-internet, pre-cell phones.
It's a different time.
Yeah, I mean, I have 5 kids. I mean, if one of them said at 15 or even 16 said, "Hey, I'm going to fly to Mexico. You're not going to hear from me.
Yep.
I got a flight. I think I have a room. I'll see you in 4 days." I'd say, "No, you're not doing that."
Yeah.
But it was an adventure, and I found guys along the way that were much older than me. That some of them were just competitors and they didn't hang out with anybody. But I identified a few of these guys that really became big brothers of mine. So when I would, if I did have a problem on the road, I could look up to them or rely on them to help me out.
All right, talk to me about we'll call it like the early stage of your career, right? Cycling wise, I believe you were diagnosed in '96, right? So late '80s to '96. What were those 5, 6, 7 years like?
Well, the biggest early memory I have was when I first made the switch from tri to cycling. I was still what they call a junior cyclist, so that's they've changed all the divisions now. But I was probably 17 or 18, and the Junior Worlds was in Moscow, and this is before the wall came down, and obviously that country is what it is still today. But I thought, wow, that's crazy. Like if I make the team, I'm going to go to Moscow and race. Like I don't even know where that is.
Oh, so it sounded like a bad idea, not a good
No, I thought it sounded like a great idea.
Yeah.
But it didn't sound very glamorous, and it turned out to not be
glamorous.
Not glamorous at all. But I thought I'm just a kid from Plano that if I can make this team, which I knew I could, I'm going to go all the way over there and race all these other kids from around the world. I was like, fuck yeah, I'm in.
Yeah.
So that was the start of it all, and then of course went on to race the Worlds next year in Germany, and then 2 years after that in Japan, and then turned pro after the Olympic Games, which I didn't do very well in Barcelona. Turned pro the very next week. I got dead ass last in my first race.
Is that a humbling experience?
It was an interesting day. It was in San Sebastian, Spain. Very, very difficult race. The weather, we started under beautiful conditions, and then halfway through the race, the conditions completely shifted, as it can in the Basque Country. Mm-hmm. And this weather rolls in, and I mean, people are just saying, okay, I'm not going to win the race. So people are just dropping out, which I would have done too 5 years later, But I was like, shit, man, this is my first race. I think I got to just try and finish. But everybody kept dropping out, and next thing you know, I'm all alone, and the director of the team's like, "Hey, you sure you want to keep going?" I was like, "Yeah, let's just keep going."
Yeah.
And
I would argue you didn't finish last then. I would argue.
Yeah, but I was the last place finisher. So but that was after that. That was it. And then I actually went from the Basque Country to another race in Galicia, which is another region of Spain, and actually won my first race. And then the next so the race in San Sebastian was a World Cup. The next World Cup was in Zurich, and I ended up getting second. So I thought, okay, that's better.
Yeah.
Right. And then, and this is still a year. I mean, I wasn't even 21 years old yet. And then the next year, won the World Championships in Oslo in 1993. And then it had some mixed years, not great years, and then was diagnosed in 96.
So pre-diagnosis, what is the state of pro cycling at the time? Like, to me, right, it feels like we had this rise up when you're winning
Yeah.
all the tours and everyone's loving it and they're super popular here in the United States. What did it feel like before all of that?
I don't know. I maybe I don't have the clearest memory, but I remember it being bigger.
Yeah.
Yeah. The crowds to me, and maybe, we had those years we had big stars. I mean, you're coming off Le Mans. You've got Indurain in Spain. You've got Chiappucci and Bugno in Italy. You've got massive stars. I mean, the crowds were massive. Obviously, the technology completely changed. I mean, if you looked at those bikes that we rode then, they look like we were riding in the 1800s. But I thought it was. I thought I was playing at the highest level. I thought it was a big deal. And I try to look. I cover all the races now with our shows, but I try to imagine or sort of compare and contrast. It's hard to do. I'm not, and it's also hard to do when you're not on the roadside or in the race, right? You're just trying to watch it on TV.
So you get diagnosed 96, right? You said
October 2nd, 96.
October 2nd. What was that process like? Let's talk about finding out, right? How you discovered it first off, and then we'll talk about afterwards. Well,
I had like a lot of events in my life, where the fallout was self-inflicted, although I didn't, somehow acquire cancer. But when I say self-inflicted, I mean, and we can talk about the other moments in my life where things were self-inflicted, but I just ignored the pain. I ignored all the symptoms, whether it's severe headaches, blurry vision, coughing up of blood, obviously, massive swelling and soreness down there. I just ignored it. I thought I had an excuse for every single one of them until finally I just couldn't ignore it anymore, which led to a really, really complicated diagnosis that almost no young man gets to. I mean, most young men catch this very early. Clearly, they're a lot smarter than me.
Yeah. Well, anyone
and their
that's
cure rate is extremely high now, but it complicated the process for me.
And I'm assuming you think some of the pain is coming from the bike at this point.
Oh,
right?
Of course, yeah.
Or you're just rationalizing.
No,
to some
that part,
degree.
yeah. No, headache is because I went out with my buddies the night before.
Yeah.
Blurry visions because I probably need to start getting reading glasses, which I didn't need for another 20 years, by the way. Now I can't live without them.
So you get
and the soreness, it's just, man, I sit on a bike 5-6 hours a day.
Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah. Where else would it be from?
Right.
Yeah.
Well.
So you get diagnosed,
Cancer.
right? Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Well, that's what it ended up being. You get diagnosed though, and I don't know if most people, just casual fans of the sport or casual people who followed the story, understand how severe it was at the time, right? People said testicular cancer, and to someone today, maybe that seems not as severe because your point, you catch it early, it gets removed, et cetera. But I think it was advanced, stage 3 maybe at the time. It had spread throughout different places
everywhere,
in your body. Where what was the diagnosis? How was that news delivered? What did they say? Et cetera?
Well, we didn't, this is, a lot has changed, as we know, from the mid-90s. So the initial diagnosis just from the ultrasound was testicular cancer, but we didn't know, and I shouldn't say that, because they did, as soon as they did that ultrasound, they had me do a chest x-ray. And that really confirmed the diagnosis because the lungs were just littered with tumors. And so I'm sure at that point, the radiologist or whoever did the imaging is going, oh man, this ain't good.
Yeah.
And we're in Austin, where I was living at the time, and we were not Austin's a big city now, but back then it was a college town. Like you didn't have a medical school, you didn't have leading oncologists, and I'm sure these people were like, this is not good.
Yeah.
And then of course we had the 2 lesions on the brain, which I didn't find out for probably 3 more weeks until I finally made my way to Indianapolis, and they did the head scan. As I was walking them through the symptoms of the blurry vision, the headaches, that was from the 2 lesions on the brain. And then there was a little stuff in the abdomen, but that stuff tends to get fixed with chemotherapy. And then of course, the testicle, just to go back to the coffee shop, that's long gone. That just goes away.
Well, they put you in. You were in surgery the next day, right?
The next morning, 7 a.m. the next morning, I thought, God, Jim Reeves was the urologist. I said, are like any patient would say, like when the doc says, "Hey, bad news, you have cancer," the patient always says, "Are you sure?"
Yeah. Second opinion, maybe, right?
Yeah. I said, well, yeah, shouldn't I check this out? And he says, "You have surgery tomorrow morning at 7 a.m."
Yeah. We're sure.
Yeah. I was like, and then he pulled out the chest X-ray, and I was like, "Oh, fuck.
Yeah.
This isn't good." And going back to just the lack of technology, because I think in the arc of my life's story, as complicated as it is, technology's played a big part. But most people that are diagnosed or loved ones of people that have been diagnosed, they immediately go to technology, right? They Google everything. They learn as much as they can. They get up like, what is this? What are my options? What are my odds? We didn't have that. We didn't have the internet in 1996, right? You're grabbing fucking pamphlets at the doctor's office. You're going to the bookstore, if anybody remembers those. Actually, a lot of people remember those. But there was the early days of the internet. You just couldn't get beamed up very quickly. So you had to really rely on your doctors.
Mm-hmm. You had an interesting scenario, if I remember correctly, where you started treatment in Austin, right? And then you went to Indiana, as you mentioned.
Did one cycle. I almost had to. It was so advanced. I couldn't have waited. They obviously did the surgery ASAP, but they also start chemotherapy ASAP. And then the way that testicular cancer chemo works is you're treated for 5 days and you have 16 days off. Mm-hmm. You have 5 days and 16 days off, and then you do that 4 times. So I had 16 days. So I got done with the initial treatment in Austin, which of course included the drug that I was ultimately taken off of, called bleomycin. But I did do one cycle of bleomycin, and then as soon as I got out, I was like, all right, I'm leaving.
And for people that don't know, bleomycin, it's very bad for your lungs. And stuff,
very
right?
toxic for the lungs, causes permanent lung scarring.
Basically, you'll never ride again.
I think if you did 4 cycles of it, yeah, I think that's a foregone conclusion.
But are you even thinking about that at this point, or you're thinking about
No. Yeah, when I ended up in Indiana, yes, yeah. They asked me. They said, "Do you, Dr. Einhorn, Dr. Nichols, Dr. Roth?" They all said, "Hey, do you ever want to race again?" Mm-hmm. And I said, "Well, I mean, I prefer to get out of here alive."
That's step one.
That's step one. And if I can achieve that, then yeah, I mean, it's it's what I've done my whole life. Mm. I said, all right, well, you're going to have to come off bleomycin, and we're going to have to alter the treatment. And the other thing I should have added is with standard treatment, you go to the chemo center, and you're treated. You're probably treated for 3 or 4 hours, and you go home. Mm-hmm. So even though you're getting chemotherapy, you're sleeping in your bed every night. When they took me off the previous protocol and put me on the new one, it was less toxic on the lungs, but more toxic on the overall body. And so they said, if you want to switch, you're going to have to be an inpatient. So you'll have to live in the hospital. Mm-hmm. I said, no problem. Yeah. So I lived in Indianapolis for a couple of months, but I got took me off the bleo, and it was doctors make a lot of very smart decisions, and I banked sperm before I was ever treated. We used that banked sperm to have my first 3 kids. These are they seem like little things, like, do I really have to do that also they also ask you that, do you ever want to have kids? Mm-hmm. Right? So just like, hey, do you ever want to go back to racing? The first question they ask you is, do you ever want to have kids? And if you say maybe or yes, then you have to bank sperm, and thank God I did that, because I got 3 beautiful kids as a product of that. And then in a weird way, it came back, and I have 2 naturally born beautiful kids too.
It's amazing, yeah. Do they ever, at this point, I'm not a doctor, right? So I don't know the exact conversations, but I'm smart enough or intelligent enough, I think, to know that stage 3 cancer, advanced, spread to different parts of the body, not great, right?
Not great.
Do they ever give you a percentage chance that you might die? Like, does it get to that point?
Well, I think there are general statistics. Everybody asks that question. So the doctors, they cannot personalize the odds for Joe or for Lance or for anybody else.
Based on the number of cases they've seen.
They have to look at, they'll just look at the history, the database, their oncology's track record, and say, this is what the stats will tell you, right? And so, and oftentimes if it's and I would do the same. If it's 20% chance of survival, they probably tell you 50% chance.
They double it, yeah.
Yeah. So
Is that what they told you?
It was, I never really leaned in too hard on that. I figured as long as I've found
you can't do anything about it, right?
There's nothing you can do. If you find the best place to be treated and you trust that place and it works, then you walk out and you're like, oh, great. And if it doesn't work, you say, hey, man, I did everything I could.
Yeah, the only reason why I ask is because it seems like, and maybe I'm completely wrong on this, right? But it seems like there was almost a trade-off to a different type of chemotherapy.
Yeah, well, I asked that. I mean, the reality of testicular cancer treatment is the main compound is platinum, right? And cisplatin is its name. So that stayed, right? So that's, I'm not a researcher, but before they had platinum-based therapy, most people died. When they came along with platinum-based therapy, most people lived.
Gotcha.
So that stayed, the bleo went out, and something else came in.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes sense.
But yes, that's a good question. Like, wait a minute, am I trying to hedge my chances to race again?
Yeah.
And hedge my chances for survival? No, I would have said no.
Okay.
I want standard therapy.
Some of the ways it's written online, it makes it seem like you're basically, I only care about racing. I want to optimize my chance of potentially racing again.
Right.
Trying, unique treatments or whatever they are. But that makes sense, right? Platinum stays. You try something that's newer.
I mean, there's a lot of stuff written about me on the internet, most of which is true, and some of it's not true. That would be one that's not true.
It's not true.
Yeah.
All right. So you get done. You're cancer-free at this point.
Yep. And then take a couple years off, a year off, really.
And you had a contract before, right? Racing-wise.
I had, yes.
It was a big contract, right?
It was big for cycling at that time, and with a French team. And so, but I couldn't race. I couldn't. I was out. The doctors wanted me to take a year off, and so it just led to a mess. They didn't. They didn't want to honor the contract. I was not going to race, and so we at the end of 1997, we just parted ways, and then I ended up on the Postal Service.
Yeah. So what is that like?
Which was a really complicated story.
You had to convince them at that point, or no?
Yeah, they were not. Look,
because this is pre-tours, right? This
is pre-tours, and if you won the world championship 5 years before that, showed a ton of potential. Most teams, and they might have consulted with other oncologists, like, hey, is this guy's body ever going to be the same, right? And I think most oncologists would say, hey, it's probably not. He's probably suffered some ill effects or side effects from the treatment. I looked at it the other way because I figured I raced, at least a year, right? With I'm the one who saw the chest X-ray. I looked at chest X-ray and I said, shit, if all that's gone, like I just can't imagine that looking at what I'm looking at is good for breathing. So in my mind, I'm thinking, well, let's just get rid of all that stuff. I'm going to feel a lot better. That's a very simple way to think about it, but it is the way I thought about it. But nonetheless, there was zero interest. And I even think Postal reluctantly took me on. I think a couple of the sponsors, of course, they're all primarily American-based companies, thought it would be a feel-good story. We'll give the cancer kid a chance, and that the rest was really history.
And you, if I remember correctly, negotiated an incentive-based contract mostly, right?
And I did in 1998 because the base salary was so low, and the way cycling was structured in the day was it was a point system. So individual at the end of the season, you had a number one rider in the world based on points, and you had a number one team in the world based on points. And so I just said, just give me $1,000 a point. Well, and they said, sure, because thinking, he might get 70 points.
Yeah.
Well, I ended up getting like 965 points.
It's almost $1 million.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they didn't love
like, holy shit.
Yeah, they were like, oh.
Let's go find money.
Yeah. So, yeah, and then won the tour the next year.
Yeah. So how does your life change at this point, right? I'm assuming it changed pretty drastically from, call it 99 to 2005.
Yeah.
Just talk me through that period a bit.
Well, it changed a lot, and it probably changed. Not probably. It did change more than I was observing, which really sort of leads to the downfall and just this disconnectedness from the massiveness of this story, and me just being sort of an athlete in my lane, training, racing, and only thinking about that. And of course the sport was complicated at the time. There was it was not anywhere near to solving a really, really big problem that I was also a part of. But I didn't. I guess looking back on it, if you think, okay, you have an American that wins the Tour de France, that's already a big deal. We've seen that before. But now you have a cancer survivor that wins the Tour de France, and then he keeps winning the Tour de France. And he builds this huge foundation, and the cycling industry explodes. Like, I didn't pay attention to any of that. But that was building this mythical story that ultimately came crashing down. But I didn't know. I didn't honor and respect the build and the following.
Yeah. What? How big was the foundation at its peak? Because I remember the bands were everywhere.
Yeah, bands were everywhere. We sold 85 million yellow wristbands. We best years we probably did somewhere between 50 and 60 million in donations.
Half a billion.
Half a billion. When I left in 2013 or 2012, we'd just gone over half a billion. So yeah, it was a good run. I
don't want to jump around too much, but do you rationalize some of what you did and what happened because of how much money was raised and the good that ultimately ended up doing?
No, I don't think I rationalized it. I did, as the heat started to intensify, I did think that that if it did all melt down, which of course it did, that would go away. Right? I was starting to feel that. I didn't rationalize what I was. I was, I wanted to win, right? And I was racing with a bunch of other guys that wanted to win. And so, we all, it was kind of gang warfare. But I never thought, well, I'm going to keep doing this because I'm helping fuel the growth of Livestrong, and Livestrong is helping millions of people and saving people's lives. No, I never went 1, 2, 3 like that.
Did it make you feel, I guess, less bad about it though, right? Because at some point,
I've heard that a lot. No, I didn't, because I never, to be honest, and I think most of us that played the game at the time never felt bad about it anyways.
Yeah.
I mean, it was the wild, wild west.
Yeah.
And I wasn't living in their skin, but you get to know a lot of guys, and you certainly get to know them later on in their lives after their careers. Yeah, I mean, it was, dude, it sucked. It was unfortunate, and none of us that played the game like that ever grew. When I was a 15-year-old kid racing triathlons or going to Moscow as a young bike racer, I never said, man, I cannot wait to fucking go to Europe, get all geared up, take a bunch of shit, and try and win. Like, no, I never thought that.
Yeah.
But I did think, I want to be the best. And, it's still baby steps, and you get there and you're looking around, and you're like, wait a minute, this is a different game. And so,
and you just keep taking it further and further.
Well,
basically.
you go, well, once you cross the line, you kind of cross the line.
Yeah. What is the tour like?
Well,
the years you're winning, right? How difficult it is? What is
it got more and more sheltered. As the first year we were a small team, and I was a first-time winner, and you could kind of live amongst the country and the fans and what they call the village depart, but as the years added up, man, it got way more almost dangerous in a lot of ways. There was a lot of threats. There was a lot of global geopolitical conflict. You had, of course, we invaded Iraq in 2004, right at the height of it all. That didn't. So here you have, George Bush was wildly unpopular in Europe, especially in France. And we're sponsored by the United States Postal Service. I'm an American. I was not popular at all in France. At least it didn't seem like. And so then we stayed in our bubble. Like, we stayed in the bus. We ate in a private room. Like, we didn't get out of the bus until right when the race was going to start. And as soon as it was done, right back in the bus.
Yeah.
We weren't around people.
Yeah.
Which is unfortunate.
Yeah, it is. For people that don't cycle or don't understand the gravity of what winning that is like, how do you explain it to people? Like, how do you explain the Tour to someone who doesn't
Look,
follow cycling?
it's the Tour is a combination of a marathon, basically a marathon every day, coupled with NASCAR, because there's a lot of
moving around,
moving around and positioning and rubbing, and as well as a chess match, right? So you constantly, as you're trying to get, there's 200 people in the race, by the way, and the roads are, they could be wide, they can be really narrow, but it doesn't matter. Who gets there first gets there first. And so you have to be physical, but you also have to play your chess game right and correctly and strategically. And then it's also very political, right? You have, if a team is, in our day, was 9 riders, now it's 8 riders. But if you're there with 9 and there's 200 in total, well, that means, just do the math, right? So that means if half of the field wanted to screw you, they're probably going to screw you. So you also had to be very political with the other teams, or your director had to be political with the other directors. So that's it. It's a marathon every day, meets NASCAR, meets chess, meets politics.
That sounds hard.
It is hard. Yeah, no,
That sounds really hard.
And it's 3 weeks.
Yeah, it's long too. Mentally draining, probably also.
Yeah, and it's hot. There's crashes.
Did you have to learn to work your way around the peloton or the field, right? Did you establish that?
Very early on.
Yeah.
I mean, going back to the late 80s, early 90s. And the other thing, too, is once you understand how to do that, it's not that hard. But once I had 2 or 3 under my belt and our team was so dominant that everybody just got out of the way.
Just got out of the way.
Yeah. I mean, there is a level of respect. At least there used to be. I've heard that sort of the sport has changed a little bit, and it's really every man and every team for himself. If you've won 7 tours, fuck off.
Yeah.
You're not coming up here. Towards the end, we were allowed to kind of own the front.
Yeah, makes sense. All right, so you win 7 in a row, you retire, you end up coming back for a couple of years, but eventually everything, as you mentioned, kind of comes crashing down, right? I think 2012, 2013, kind of around that area. What happened?
Well, I mean, it was a lot happened. What happened? Look, the suspicion was always there. I mean, the suspicion began in 1999 and just grew from there. And then the comeback really allowed the authorities. If I don't come back, all the things that I'm going to tell you that happened, all of those things wouldn't have happened if I didn't come back, because the comeback was the bridge to the past. It extended the statute of limitations. It extended the story in the public's eye and in their minds. And so that was the bridge to those days. So, but the first thing that really happened was and this guy's gone on to, he's sort of famous for getting Marion Jones and getting Roger Clemens and Barry Bonds, this guy by the name of Jeff Nowitzki, who's now with the UFC. So he focused on cycling. So he started digging in. He did Balco. He did, all the cases. Yep. And a lot of your listeners know these cases. So he starts, as a federal investigator, he starts poking around and starts interviewing some of my competitors, some of my teammates, anybody really. I mean, he loved what he did. I mean, he thought this was the coolest thing ever.
Yeah.
Walking around with a badge and a gun and asking hard questions and making people cry. And Jeff is not a very stand-up guy, as most people know, but whatever. I mean, he had the authority to do it, and that was it. After that, after you had people singing like a bird to a federal agent, it was over. Mm-hmm. And then that led to a criminal investigation, which ultimately, for some reason, was, well, not really sure why. I should back up, but why there was ever like a criminal investigation in the Central District of California about a Texan that raced bikes in Europe.
And what was the thought behind that, right? Was it because it's the U.S. team?
No, that didn't come till later. We never could figure out what the charge would be or what the crime would be because
Why California, right?
Why? Well, California, because Nowitzki had friendly people in the U.S. Attorney's Office there they allowed him to impanel. And again, listen, I'm just telling you and your listeners how it went down from my perspective.
Yeah.
I'm not a fan of Jeff Nowitzki. It is the past. I don't ever want to have a beer with that guy.
Yeah.
But I don't want this to sound like I'm criticizing. He had the power to do it, and he had allies in the U.S. Attorney's Office in Los Angeles that allowed him to impanel a grand jury. So if he fed on these things, right? And so he did. Mm-hmm. He went and did those, and then you start pulling people into the grand jury. Then it is really over. Mm-hmm. Criminal case gets dropped, and almost immediately 2 people jumped in, the DOJ on the civil side because technically or somehow technically Postal Service was a governmental agency, and USADA, which is the U.S. Anti-Doping Agency.
USADA was 2012?
I think I mean, although they were Jeff and Travis,
it was going for years, right?
Going for years, and they're very close. They were sharing and comparing notes, which they're not supposed to do, but that's okay.
But USADA, I asked because when the USADA report came out, that was when sponsors left. That was when everything fell, right?
Yes, yeah. So they took a long time to do that.
Yeah,
and then when they finally dropped the USADA report, then everybody left, and then the civil side intervened.
And when USADA drops, sponsors leave. What is the financial impact of that, roughly?
It's a big number.
Yeah, tens of millions.
No,
potentially more. 100.
No, it's $111 million.
111. Yeah, wow. So basically adding up all the sponsorship agreements done, 111 million.
All the stuff that was that included, and again, some of this stuff, sometimes sounds like I'm trying to gain sympathy. I'm not. I made my bed. That $111 million bed I was sleeping in, that's my fault, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm just telling you. Asked the question, I gave you the answer. That included sponsor dollars. It included litigation because the team that I was that I was on was offsetting a lot of my, whether bonuses or salary increases, they were insuring them.
Gotcha.
So they were laying all these essentially betting off on these insurance companies that I only knew about one policy. All the others I had no idea. So the shit hits the fan, and every week I'm getting a letter from some insurance company like, "Hey, you owe us $15 million." I'm like, "Who are you?"
Yeah.
And I'm like, "Oh, fuck."
Yeah.
He laid off the whole thing, the guy that owned the team, Tom Weisel. So, and then, also that also includes attorney's fees, which were significant. But it is what it is. I've managed to land on my feet. I've got 5 beautiful, healthy kids. I got the ball back. I'm playing offense. And I wouldn't change a thing.
I like that. Uber.
Yeah, that helped.
That helped, right?
That helped.
Have you ever publicly said what happened there? Like, I know you invested in Chris Sacca's fund, right?
Yep.
And I thought I read somewhere that he was going to buy like Twitter shares or like employee shares.
Yeah, I met Sacca at a bar in Aspen, actually, where I live now. At the bar upstairs at Montsahisa, to be exact. And he was, if you've ever met Sacca, he's a great guy, but he's very animated. Like, his huge personality, talks a million miles an hour. I'm like, dude, this guy is lit up. But I thought, and he said, let's keep in touch. I said, okay. And that time, at that day and time, or that period of my life, I didn't keep in touch with a lot of people. But someone said, like, I'm going to keep in touch with this guy. So we exchanged numbers, and then he went to start his first fund some years after that, Lowercase Capital. And so I invested in that fund. And
you were an LP in Fund 1.
I was an LP in all of his funds, but especially Fund 1.
Yeah.
And so, I knew he was smart and connected, and I think was going to be a good investor. I knew that Twitter was part of the equation, but I didn't know that Uber, he had such a huge stake in Uber.
Yeah, and you're an LP. He's basically passing along information as it becomes
And
available.
and at that point in my life, I had a full-time team on my side that was managing, business manager, an agent, a manager. So any sort of quarterly updates or all this stuff that, they were reading through all that. I was just out, being me.
When did you find out about like the magnitude of it?
I didn't find out about Uber until
Before they went public?
yeah. But until 2016 or 17.
Yeah, that's a nice surprise.
Yeah, I was like, wait, what?
Yeah.
And it's fun to talk about, and it's we can reminisce about Chris and I meeting and me putting money into his fund, and but the reality is, in light of the conversation we just had, if not for that, I don't know how I would have fed my family.
Really?
So when you think about it like that, like it's not funny anymore, right? It's fucking magic. And so I don't know how the numbers were exaggerated, right, when the news first broke, but and the numbers didn't even replace what I told you what the losses were, but the numbers were big, and it was magic. And I'm thankful that I stayed for that extra beer and shared my number with Chris Sacca.
I love that.
And I had the same story with DocuSign. Same.
What happened with DocuSign?
Same. Trusting or investing in a fund that was run by somebody that I had known for a long time that I just figured was a smart, connected guy. I thought he'd be a great investor. And that fund was out of Seattle called Ignition, and that one fell, not long after Uber. I mean, all of a sudden the email comes in, "Hey, we got a distribution." I'm like, "Wait, what?" There's another one that put some more meals on the table.
Yeah.
So, but picking good fund managers, and thank God.
What did your business look at the time, right? Are you you obviously sound like you had a team that was helping you out with this kind of stuff, but are you actively investing, or it's just opportunities that come up? Like, how were you thinking about it then versus now?
Boy, it's totally different now.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm way more involved now. Although the lowercase story is a little funny because the team didn't really know Chris.
Yeah.
They did some calls with him. I said, "No, we are doing this deal."
Yeah.
And people in the room, "I don't know, first time fund, what is it?" I said, no, just give the guy. I don't even remember what we gave him, but it was enough to be a lot.
Yeah.
And so, but now it would be a totally different approach. I mean, I think I'm a much, and I'm not trying to toot my own horn because I'll tell you I do most of this myself. I have on my personal side, I do it myself, and I have one kid who works with me in Aspen who's awesome. And then I have a team of 3 others on the fund side that are even way smarter than me, but I'm just way more engaged, way more involved. And so,
well, you also probably don't have the time back then, right? You're doing a million different things. You're training. You're
yeah, but you know what? In
sponsorships.
hindsight, and especially sitting in the seat that I sit in now, I would have, some of those years were retirement years, so I had time. It would have been a great opportunity to learn, and obviously I did learn some things, but I've learned a hell of a lot more the last 3 or 4 years doing what I'm doing now.
Yeah. So you do the Oprah interview. That's a good one. I assume
I don't know if it was that good.
I assume your lawyers probably didn't like that at the time. Is that accurate?
Yeah.
They hated it?
They wouldn't talk to me for a little while.
Really? And you just told them we're doing it?
Look, lawyers, if a lawyer, and I had great lawyers, if a lawyer had their way, you wouldn't talk to your mother. You wouldn't talk to your wife, much less Oprah Winfrey in front of one of the biggest audiences in the world. No, you do not talk. And so I overrode that on their decision or their wish.
Why though?
Look, the way I figured is because, again, I was getting these letters every week from these insurance companies, and I knew there would be litigation, and then there were these early days where you're like, okay, the civil side, I mean, I am going to be interviewed by a federal agent or by the DOJ. And there, all bets are off, right? You have to be totally honest. And so I thought, I'm just imagining in my head, I'm like, I know what's going to happen, right? I'm going to sit there, I'm going to be honest, and they're going to leak the video, and it's going to be some shitty, grainy video where some guy or gal is just completely nuking you in a deposition. And I'm like, fuck. I mean, I'd rather do it this way and just pop the balloon.
It's like making like a YouTube video today.
Yeah,
you know, like on your own terms
and
to
they
some
would have.
extent.
I firmly believe that they would have. So I just said, you know what? Let's just get this out of the way.
Yeah.
Because there was no fixing the situation. It was getting burned to the ground.
Did you feel better after that?
Not really. No, I mean, I in the sense that, I mean, what do you mean? That I got it off my chest,
Personally,
or
yeah.
that?
Yeah.
I mean, I was not. I've heard a lot of folks that gave similar interviews that said, I walked out of the room and the weight of the world was off me. I kind of think that's bullshit sometimes, a lot of times. I knew what was going to happen to me, so I was glad to get it out of the way. I actually thought our conversation went pretty well. She thought it went pretty well, but nobody else thought it went very well. And so somebody once said that, how did they characterize it? That, they said for some folks, it wasn't enough, and for other folks, it was way too much.
Yeah.
And so you just got, everybody hated it.
Yeah. How does that work? Does she, like an interview like that, do you get questions beforehand? Do you tell her what you're willing to say? Is it an open floor?
Open floor, yeah. And I don't like
you're gonna do it, you
look,
have to go
I
with
didn't ask you for what you want to talk about. At this thing I'm going to go speak at 4:30 tonight. The moderator asked me if I want to see the questions. I don't ever want to see the questions.
Yeah.
Like then I'm going to sit. Especially at this point in my life where it's 100% real. Fuck, I don't want to know what you're going to ask me so I can think about it for days in advance and come up with some canned bullshit answer and fool you and fool your audience. It's like, no, just fire away.
Yeah.
You know.
In that case.
No, yeah. Honestly, I do a lot of speaking now, and I always open it up to the floor. I say, hey, before anybody starts, there is nothing off limits.
Yeah.
Like I just don't care.
Yeah.
And it's not that I don't care. It's just that it's all out there. I'm just not afraid of talking honestly about the whole story.
You mentioned earlier about when federal agents started asking questions, you knew that it was over, right? You knew that was a problem. That happened several years before, right? And you continued at some point to say, hey, this isn't what's happening. I've, beaten tests. I haven't done these things. Why did you do that if you knew it was over?
Well, that wasn't, it's hard to know who they've talked to.
Yeah.
So we knew they had obviously talked to Landis very early. A guy like that, you think you can kind of get on credibility. And you would hear rumblings of people but when they talked to George, who was, my longtime teammate and still a great friend of mine, that's when you never heard me say another thing. Like when they called George in and we heard, George would not tell me this, but we heard from his lawyer to my lawyer that, hey man, this guy he was honest.
Yeah.
That's when I said, okay, we're done. Mm-hmm. So after that, there were no more press releases that talked about, past tests. And by the way, we did pass all the tests.
Yeah.
That's not bullshit.
Yeah.
We did. The testing sucked.
Yeah. What was wrong with the testing at the time?
There's two things, right? The testing, in the early days, they didn't have a test. So they were trying to perfect, we're talking about one drug. Mm-hmm. We're talking about EPO.
Yep.
They're trying to perfect a test for this drug. So the test is imperfect. However, the drug is perfect. So you've got a shitty test over here and a bunch of probably, shitty administrators trying to figure out how to perfect it. Meanwhile, over here, you have a drug that's literally perfect. Mm. It's 10% beneficial. It has a 4-hour half-life, which means, and you don't have to, it just leaves the body very quickly. It is a perfect drug. And I'm not endorsing it or telling anybody to try it.
But given what you needed it to do, it was perfect for that situation.
We tested negative because the tests were negative.
Yeah.
Which I'm not saying that we didn't do it. I'm just saying we passed the test. The test that they gave us at the time, which by the way is still the same test and the drug is still the same drug, although I think it's used a lot less. it's still there. The half-life is still as short as it is, which means it leaves your body. You'd have to live with somebody and say, let me test you right now, which of course you can't do. So it was a intersection of those two.
How many people, part of this, right? And again, I know you're not trying to play the sympathy card to some extent, but I'm curious your thoughts because you obviously were in cycling for a long time, dominated the sport, you still covered and you look at it and talk about it a lot. A lot of people were doing it back then, right? I don't know the percentage. You probably have a more clear picture on that. But why do you think the reaction was so negative to you specifically? Was it just because you were dominating who you were,
Well,
you were raising money?
Yeah. I mean, look, that's an easy one. I mean, it just for starters, the biggest athlete in the world is always gonna fall the hardest. But when that person was so defiant, and when this is the point I was trying to say earlier, this idea of self-inflicted, because it was. If I was just a cyclist who doped and didn't say a word, got in those press conferences and said, I don't know, next question. Didn't take anybody on, didn't sue anybody, didn't call anybody a name. None of this happens. There are a lot of those guys.
Yeah.
But
And people don't even know their names.
No.
Right? The common people.
But the guy that's by far the biggest rider in the world, who's incredibly defiant, and then also has the story behind it. It was too good a story. I mean, these look, guys like Travis and Nowitzki, they have jobs to do, but let's not be mistaken. They loved this. Like this was different. This wasn't just
the
doing.
hunt. Yeah,
this wasn't just doing the job. This was like, yes, this is a big game right here. And
Which some would argue is their job, right? To
Yeah.
find the biggest
Yeah.
game and try their hardest at that.
yeah, they're not very successful. I mean, I think, look, if I do it all day, every day, invest in people and invest in businesses. If you saw the stats on the anti-doping movement around the world, you'd run out of this room.
Yeah. Well, as in they're not catching enough people, basically.
Yeah, well, you look, I mean, I'll just give you the three stats real quickly. Rough, estimates, or not even rough, but pretty precise estimates actually of the global spend on anti-doping is right around $500 million. As they have gone through and done some very, very anonymous studies with athletes, they sort of roughly think that, and these are athletes answering honestly in an anonymous survey, they roughly figure 25 to 40% of them would dope or do dope.
Of all athletes globally,
Yeah.
professional athletes.
Yeah.
Wow.
The catch rate, the positive rate, is less than 1%.
Wow.
So you spend $500 million, you got upwards of potentially 40% of the people, and you catch less than 1%. Would you invest in that business?
No.
Okay, exactly.
Yeah.
But look, you can't do without it. And again, I'm just giving you the numbers.
Yeah.
I'm highlighting the story and the characters, and I'm one of the characters.
Well, there's nuance to every
none of us are
topic too,
none of
right?
us are sharing Christmas cards. That's no secret.
Yep.
But that's the reality. But the other reality is you have to have it, right? I mean, if my son wanted to ride in the Tour de France and they said, well, you know what, we're not going to have any drug testing, I would say, you're crazy. Like, no, my son's not going then. Mm-hmm. So it's just difficult.
Two questions off of that. First, if it's 40% globally, right, for all sports, what do you think it is in cycling in the past versus today?
I think the sport,
It seems like it's gotten cleaned up a bit, right?
I want to agree. I think I agree.
Yeah.
I'm not, and this isn't a cop-out, but this is my answer, and it's the answer I always give. I have no access to the sport. I cover the sport. I watch it on TV. I speak to an audience afterwards. I've got no tentacles in the sport. I've got no scoop, no gossip. I have no access.
What do you think it was back then, though?
Well, it was a lot. I mean,
Like 90%?
Yeah. I mean, and keep in mind that for when the EPO era began, and some would argue in the late '80s, early '90s, you didn't have a test. We didn't have a test until really a decade plus. So I'm still talking about the same drug, right?
Yeah.
The one that's 10% beneficial, has a very short half-life. Most would argue has very little side effects. It was like wildfire.
I remember pretty clearly some message that you said at some point. I don't know exactly word for word, but at some point when this was all going on, and I've seen it since, you basically said something along the lines of, I had cancer. I'd be an absolute idiot to be doing this type of stuff.
Right.
Why would I put more drugs in my body, all this type of stuff?
Right.
What are you thinking when you're saying that?
And you're not thinking, but the most important thing for me, just even hearing you say that, because I've seen, and you get shown a lot of these things when you're deposed, right? They make it as hard on you as possible. They show you all these tapes. Yeah. We'll just watch this, and then we'll have some questions. Not thinking, but either the times that I have been exposed or watched that since then, or even just hearing you say it, it is so, Joe. There's only one word. It's embarrassing. I mean, it's you'd love to go back and try to say, can I re-say that, or can I take that back? But you can't, man. Everything lives forever now, and that's a fucking disgrace. And there's no way to justify that, and it's totally humiliating.
Yeah. How did you explain it to your kids? Were they old enough at the time to understand what was going on, or was that later?
My older kids were old enough to they lived through it. I mean, when I did Oprah, they were in middle school, so we were living in Austin at the time. There was some preliminary work done with the school and all of their teachers and counselors and a lot of other of their friends' parents, just to kind of prepare for this, believe it or not. And I don't want to say it was great, but the city of Austin and the schools there handled it amazingly well. Yeah. They're very helpful.
And then protecting them basically. From,
in the hallways.
Yeah.
You know,
kids are mean, right? And
kids are mean. Thank God this is before
social media.
Yeah, TikTok and all this other shit that they're into. But that was outside of the home. Inside the home, I kept a very open channel of communication with the kids. Like, let's talk about this. And if you want to talk about it next week, we'll talk about it next week. If you want to wait a year, we'll talk about it in a year. And that rule runs true until today. If you got questions, let's talk about it.
I think I know it's become more open and from a discussion point of view over time, mental health, right? Mm-hmm. Did you struggle with that at all through this period?
No, I mean, I had, outside of just fear for how I was going to care for my family, no, I didn't. But I never struggled. I always wanted to get up and train hard and race hard and go kick ass. Like I never ever thought anything other than that. And this was another type of war, but the only thing like I said, I was really fearful that I wouldn't be able to provide for my family.
Yeah. Were they nervous too at some point?
You'd have to ask them. I don't know. That's a good question. I've never asked them that question. Yeah. I should ask them that question.
I'm sure if you were
I should ask Anna.
Like,
I mean, I've never even asked my wife that question, but yeah, that's a great question.
All right.
I'll give you that. I'll report back.
What's life like today? You're obviously, so for people that don't know you, you have a venture fund, Next Ventures. You guys have raised some money. You've invested in some great companies. Yep. What are you doing day to day? What's life like?
So, and I really do.
This is a better conversation, more fun.
Yeah. No, I mean, look, I actually don't mind the other. Talking about all the things we just talked about is always this is why I like telling people when I'm giving a speech to a YPO chapter or a big room, say, listen, fire away. Yeah. Let's fucking go. Because it's just a reminder to me. I mean, it's in a way, it's cathartic and healthy, and it's just a reminder of what a fucking fool I was. And I like being reminded of that because I will have success again in my life, right? And then there's only one person who can fuck it up, and it's me. Just like I fucked up chapter 1, I can also fuck up chapter 2. So it's nice to it's not, maybe nice might not be the word, but I think it's healthy to relive a lot of that stuff. So what am I doing now? So I do really two main things. Primarily, we have an early stage venture fund called Next Ventures. We invest across the spectrum of health and wellness and healthcare. I have two great partners, Julian Ice and Mel Strong. and then a great kid on the team who's the one who's a big fan of yours. When I told him I was doing the podcast, he was like, "Oh, dude, that's cool."
I like him already.
Yeah, Jordan, and they're all a hell of a lot smarter than me. We've made 18 investments thus far. We've got some great companies in there, of the likes of Oura Ring and Outside and SteadyMD, and we know the space, and we think this space is here to stay, right? No matter what's going on. I mean, God, there's so much shit going on in the world with interest rates and recession, and now crypto, and health and wellness is not.
It's not going anywhere.
It's never going away, and so we're long the space. We know the space,
and from a technology standpoint, that's accelerating more than anything, right?
Yeah, and we're getting good results, and so. We'll keep doing that. So that's one thing. I spend about 90% of my time on that. And then I have, which is what I alluded to earlier when I was talking about technology. So a few years ago, I started a very similar show to this called The Forward. And COVID sort of killed it for a while. I'm with you. I hate doing these on Zoom.
That's better in person.
Way better. And then on the heels of that, started a cycling show, which I was really reluctant to do, but eventually we did it. And that show blew up, and that's kind of been.
And you recap.
I'm trying to think what you would compare it to. It's like any post game or post race analysis show, typically 30 to 40 minutes. So in the summer during the tour, we are all in one place. We build a studio. It's a very, it's a fairly big production. Otherwise, we do the spring races and the other races on Zoom, but that's been a big hit, and so. Those are the two things I do, and then
You like the media stuff?
Well, this is what I was alluding to earlier, right? So when we were talking about technology and as part of my cancer journey, not having technology there to help me along the way, I love it, and what I love about it is that because I started the first show, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago, if my story would have happened 10 or 20 years prior, I'm toast.
Yeah.
Right? You're just sitting around, you're like, man, is ESPN ever going to call one day and want me to talk about the tour? Is CNN going to, I don't know who's going to call, right? But you are waiting on a call. We live in a day and age, just like we're doing right now. You buy these mics, the light, the camera, anybody can create content. Yep. It is an amazing
playing field.
Without the fact of that, I would have been completely fucked. And I wasn't. I was able to go out and say, all right, let's start doing a podcast. Bought the mics, uploaded to all the platforms. People started getting into it. And then it grew and it grew and it grew. And then we added the second show. And then we now got like 10 other titles under that umbrella brand. So, yeah, man. It's good to be alive today.
Yeah, I like that. Question on the fund. This is an interesting one, I think, is like, you're obviously raising money from LPs, right, to invest this money.
Yep.
Was it difficult to get them to give you money because of everything that happened?
Yeah.
Yeah. How'd you overcome that?
Well,
did they just not trust you initially? No, yeah. And you have to earn that?
Well, the ones who are LPs,
yeah,
I would not say that they don't trust me. There must be some level of trust. I'm sure there were people along the way that just said, and I really didn't hear a lot of this. Maybe some of my partners protected me from that, but you have to imagine that there were people who's like, hell no, I won't even take the meeting.
Yeah.
So much less give the kid or the team money. I don't even want the meeting. I'm sure that happened.
And not even necessarily because of investing skills. They just don't want to be associated.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which, listen, man, I am perhaps one of the most polarizing figures in America or in the world. And so you have two choices when you know that you're that guy, right? You either live with it or you don't, right? I have chosen to live with it. So I don't know what the split is. Let's just say it's 50-50. I actually don't think it is, but let's call it that. If somebody comes up to me on the street and says, just like they did the other day, I was an awesome lady, ran out of a restaurant, said, I love you, Lance. And I was like, fuck, that's awesome.
Yeah.
If I keep walking down the block and some guy walks out and says, hey, fuck you, Lance, I go, all right.
That's cool too.
That's cool. I get it.
Yeah.
I get it.
I imagine that probably really doesn't happen all that often.
It's only happened once.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
People are much less likely to do that in person.
Yeah. And when the time it happened, it really happened. But
is there a story there? That seems like
you got to watch the 30 for 30.
It kicks
off the 30 for 30.
Yeah, I've seen it. Did you like the 30 for 30? Maybe like's not the right word. But.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard to watch a 3-hour thing about your life and be the subject of it. You can't. You could be the Pope. They'd make a documentary and you wouldn't like it. You're going to find something in there that you don't like.
Yeah.
But in the end, it was good for me, and I'm glad that I did it. And I'm thankful that ESPN and Marina and Jim Pitaro and everybody. I'm glad they did it. So,
what was that like? They came to you, or you?
Oh, it took years. We did it over years.
Yeah, I'm sure it's a process, right?
Yeah, it took a long time.
A long time.
Yeah, but Marina was great. That's who I spent most of the time with. She was the director, and I enjoyed. I don't like sitting down for interviews a lot, as you know, because we've been trying to do this for a long time. But I liked her. Yeah. I liked being around her. So even if we weren't doing an interview and we were just grabbing dinner or just shooting the shit, like I liked her.
Yeah.
Makes it easier. It would have been different if we were like, oh my God, this lady's so annoying. She was cool. I enjoyed time with her.
What do you think your place in cycling is today? Like, what is your relationship with cycling? We'll call it.
Well, it's a good question. I don't.
I assume you don't think about it much.
I don't
right?
think about it very much. I know, and this isn't a popular answer, but I know who won the races.
Yeah.
And more importantly than that, the people that I raced against know who won the races. Mm-hmm. So let's establish that as a baseline. It would be totally different, and it does get a little under my skin that I think an event as great as the Tour de France. Think about you cover all of this stuff, right? I read your shit every day. I listen to your shows. The Tour is a very special event. It's been around more than 100 years. It's arguably one of the biggest annual sporting events in the world. It is magnificent. It is beautiful. It is historical. You cannot have a 7-year span without a winner.
Yeah.
There has to be a winner. There has to be. I mean,
not according to Wikipedia.
Well,
I went on there before this to see if it's off, and it's,
I know,
it's off.
But here's the thing. Here's the thing. And I firmly believe this, and I talk about this sometimes. History edited my story.
Yeah.
History's not done. This thing will continue to be edited. So you asked me where my place is in sort of cycling right now. It is where it is, and and history will continue to edit this story. Wikipedia, it will not be like that forever. I promise you. You cannot have an event that great with no winner, or then promote somebody else, or do something. I mean, you just cannot have it that way. It makes no sense.
Yeah, and is the most obvious argument?
Now, let me just start. And I'm not trying to. I mean, or you have some other concerted and well thought out and smart effort, almost like a truth and reconciliation. Where you're just like, all right, we all admit this is a really fucked up time. We ain't doing it again. Mm-hmm. I mean, if countries like Rwanda can come together and have truth and reconciliation and two just tribes that you can't possibly imagine hate each other more and just done unbelievable things to each other, if they can come together and agree to move on, then, that's a little extreme of an example, but that would have been a better way to acknowledge the past, acknowledge that everybody fucked up, and move forward and put the thing in a box and send it on its way. Meanwhile, that didn't happen.
Did you ever receive or have you talked to sponsors or old sponsors and I don't want to say like patched up, but like have they thanked you for some of the stuff that you did for them, or is it just all anger still? Or
no, I don't think so. I mean, there were there wasn't that. I mean, there were no. I mean, well, I shouldn't say that. Like, let's take there were a few really big ones, right? You had the Postal Service. There's not been any
no conversations,
no cups of tea there. Yep. Trek bikes, no cups of tea. Oddly enough, I mean, in the story of Trek, I don't hear from Trek, but I hear from all their competitors. Because during that era, as Trek went from 100 million in sales to $1 billion, everybody else, Specialized did the same, Giant did the same, Cannondale did the same. So all ships rose with that tide. Mm-hmm. So I hear, oddly enough, from their competitors. Not much contact at Nike, although Phil Knight has been a really, really good friend to me through all this. And then some of the other ones, but that's, look, I'm not a sponsorable athlete, if that's even a word, right? I'm 51 years old. I don't compete at the highest level. I'm not on TV. I'm just a recreational athlete. So it's.
Do you still ride a bunch today?
I ride as much as I can. We live in Aspen, and it's
Mountain bikes, I guess.
mountain biking in the summer, but now it's full on snow, wintertime. So, but I find this morning I woke up and found a pool nearby, so took an Uber over there, swam 3,000 and Ubered back.
Oh, you still swim? You like swimming the best?
Swimming's my, if the world said you got to pick one sport the rest of your life, it'd be close between swimming and golf. But love to swim. I mean, I wouldn't go find some random pool in Miami Beach and swim for an hour if I didn't love it.
Yeah. Last question. Why did you come back? I was just thinking about this in 09, right? Because you mentioned, right? And I'm thinking about it because you said that if you didn't come back, a lot of this probably doesn't happen. Maybe none of it.
It doesn't happen. But, and it's easy to, and I've sort of changed this answer over the years, because I would often say, "Oh, the biggest mistake of my life," and "What the fuck? Why did I do that?" And I wish I wouldn't have done it. I mean, you asked me why did I come back? I mean, I was, it was part boredom. It was part. Livestrong was slipping just because you naturally would slip if you don't have that stage anymore. So I thought, let's give it a little more gas. This guy won the Tour de France in 2008. This kid from Spain I thought he was just like a complete busboy. I'm like, I could beat this guy in my sleep, which are all, none of these are really great reasons.
Yeah.
To come back.
But combined together, you're still competitive.
Yeah, but you're still coming back to one of the hardest sports in the world.
You're nearly 40 at this point?
No, when did I come back? I was like mid-30s.
Mid-30s, yeah.
Which is too old.
Yeah.
And so, but I did. Like, we can all sit here and talk about whatever. But I did come back. And that was the bridge to the past. And that did lead to a really hard decade in my life. That's okay, Joe. I'm sitting here right now. I'm going to leave right here. I'm going to walk out. I'm going to go do this thing. I'm going to fly to New York, do another thing tomorrow. And I'm going to be me the whole time. Mm-hmm. It's a fucking good gig. Yeah. Like, I don't want to change a thing. People ask a lot, would you do it again? All of these are all strokes on the canvas, man. And I love my life. And I'm super thankful. Back to your question earlier about raising money, I'm super thankful that people trusted me to invest their money. And, I'm going to live with it and roll with it and be happy.
Yeah. The one thing we didn't really talk about, which I was curious about too, was the foundation, right? So you obviously left the foundation. I don't know what that split was necessarily like. But one, how difficult was that? And then two,
very difficult. What
is the relationship, not only to the foundation today, if any, but
non-existent.
But
I'm giving you short answers on this.
But cancer-wise, are you involved in anything in and around cancer research, donations, all that kind of stuff?
No, not on the nonprofit side. I look, the extent of my cancer work now is through my iPhone, right? I get a message from somebody either through socials or through a friend, or it doesn't matter. I just grab my phone.
Yeah.
Bang out a 20-second video. Hey, man. Hey, Joe. Heard about your recent diagnosis, man. You're so loved. We're all thinking about you, pulling for you. Let me know if I can help.
Yeah. So
Joe Strong. Yeah. That's it. And then I hit send, and I'm out. And they love it. They keep it forever, and that's cool. We did actually invest in a company at Next Ventures called Trial Library, which is a clinical trials play with helping the underserved community with access to clinical trials, which are just so wildly important. So some involvement there, but none with the American Cancer Society or Livestrong. And look,
what was the split like with the foundation?
Not good. It was terrible. Yeah, I mean,
and the board basically said we can't be associated with this.
Right, you gotta. You're gone, and we're changing the name. Because before that, it was called the Lance Armstrong Foundation. So then it officially changed to Livestrong.
Yep.
No, it was heartbreaking. And
did you even know that could happen at the time?
Yeah, I mean, dude, there was a lot going on at the time.
I just mean from like a structure standpoint, right? I think when most people put together a foundation or a business, even they don't even understand.
I actually said, okay, well, whatever.
Yeah.
See ya. But I also knew that it was a bad idea.
Yeah.
It was a bad idea. I should back up. I thought it was a bad idea because I thought a couple of things. One, you cannot separate the two. And I think they would agree with that now, right? If your color is yellow and your fight is cancer and your name is Livestrong,
You almost have to change everything.
you have to go purple, fight Parkinson's, and call it something else.
Yeah.
Because if you're walking down the streets of Paris, Texas, or Paris, France, and you say Livestrong, give me a name.
Yeah.
They give you the name, so it's there forever. And you know, look, I mean, I'm assuming I'll give you an example. So our summer show is massive. The tour show, it does millions and millions of downloads in just 3 weeks. The tour started this year just a few weeks after this unimaginable tragedy in Uvalde. We had a group come to us and said, look, we want to give a bike to every kid in every elementary school in Uvalde, but it's going to be 800 bikes, and we're going to need, I think they needed $160,000. And I said, don't worry, my audience will help. Mm-hmm. We did it in like 7 days.
Yeah.
Like the audience, so you can imagine if, and it's almost,
if you were still connected to the condition.
Yeah, but I think the damage is done, and
well, I imagine at some point
no going back.
they couldn't see the other side, right? They only saw the valley in between that you went through for years. I imagined, where I would argue you're probably on the other side of that now, right? Where you're doing a bunch of different things, mm-hmm. and the image has changed to some degree. But at first, initially, it's probably pretty difficult.
Yeah.
What'd you say to them when they called you?
Well, I didn't.
No good words.
Nothing good. I think it was on an email.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I'm not very proud of that either. But it was heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Yeah, but no winners. There's no winners there, Joe. And I don't like stories where there's no winners.
Mm-hmm. Well, you guys, if I remember correctly, too, you weren't necessarily funding cancer research, right? You were funding
all about awareness and listen. We were raising a lot of money, but if you're raising $50 million a year, that sounds like a lot of money. But in the world of fighting cancer, I mean, you literally have to spend billions of dollars.
Yeah.
So we were
even more.
Right? Yeah, right. I mean, and you could make the argument that we should be spending 50 times more.
Yeah.
But we were highly effective on the educational side, the awareness side, the advocacy side. I mean, we got a $1 billion bond initiative passed in the state of Texas. We did, Livestrong did. That cost us about $500,000 to get passed, right? So the way I looked at that, we spent $500,000, we got $1 billion, and it's still there.
Good trade.
It's a great trade. So, but no, we were not, and we got a lot of criticism. Oh, these fucking people, they say they're funding cancer research. We never said that.
Yeah.
Well, if a journalist would write that, or somebody would say that, we never said that. The website was very clear.
Well, I would actually make the argument that what you guys were doing was better, right? Because of how much resources are already being put put there, yeah. And $50 million a year, to be honest, is not really going to make a dent.
And you're going to have a very hard time finding the right place to deploy that kind of money.
Yeah, giving it away is another difficult problem. What was the origin story of the Livestrong band? How'd that come about?
I thought the last question was like 3 questions.
Yeah, we're going to keep going. No, this is the last one. Livestrong band.
The Livestrong band.
Because those things were everywhere.
Nike made them for basketball players, and I think they were called ballers.
Yep.
And I don't know, maybe different colors. And a lot of people take credit for it, but which means you can never figure out whose idea it was.
Yeah.
But somebody in that room said, why don't we take a baller, make it yellow, we'll make 6 million of them in honor of him trying to win his 6th tour. We'll sell them for $1. And if we sell them all, we'll raise $6 million. So they brought me this idea, and I said, that is the dumbest fucking idea ever. But I had to wear it, right? And we all had to wear it, and the team wore it, and other riders in the tour wore it. And then not long after that, they had the Olympic Games in Greece. A lot of that, all sports wore it. And the thing we went through 5 million like that, and then 10 and 20, and obviously now well north of 80 million. So it wasn't such a bad idea. I thought it was, I didn't know what I thought. I didn't think it was a great idea.
I don't want to age you, but I was wearing those things in middle school. No, it was a good time.
Yeah, it was a good time. It was, And it's spun off every different color, every different cause. I mean, we raised $80-some million, but imagine if you, I don't know. I mean, that might even be $1 billion number that was raised for some charity, whether doesn't matter what it was.
Yeah, because people took
it doesn't
them and
matter
they
what.
did different
They
things.
used all the colors and everybody had them. So good.
Thank you
It's a great
so much
idea.
for doing
Yeah,
this.
Thanks for having me.
I appreciate it.
You bet.
You couldn't have been nicer with your time, so thank you so much.
Yeah, I don't even know how long we went.
I don't know.